Well, after 7 long years, we finally got Silksong. There's not really much structure to this video, but it will effectively just be my thoughts on the game as a whole. At the time of writing this, I just finished 100%ing the game, with some minor caveats, and wanted to get some words out there while the feelings and thoughts are still fresh. This is in no way meant to be a real review of the game, just sort of a rambling diary or something maybe. My perspective is from someone who played Hollow Knight very close to release, considers Hollow Knight one of his favorite games of all time, and generally considers Metroidvanias to be one of his favorite genres. That is all to say that my thoughts, feelings, and rationale towards certain parts of this game do come from a place of love and passion. I'm not a tourist here, I'm bought in. There will be some spoilers, big and small, and I'm sure there will even be some subtle ones I didn't think were spoilers when I wrote them. I'll try to leave the super spoilery things toward the second half, but it is simply impossible to discuss the game in any meaningful capacity without spoiling at least some things. I'll leave a timestamp for when I start going super in depth with the spoilers, but again, do not consider the first part of this video to be spoiler free. It is not. Also, the nature of these sorts of discussions make it far easier to be positive with fewer spoilers and easier to be negative with more spoilers. So the first part of the video will probably end up being way more full of praise, and the second part will be a lot more full of criticism. I'm not intentionally writing the script that way or structuring the video this way. It's just hard to elaborate on a lot of criticisms about the game without going more in depth about them. To begin with, I'll say that Silksong is absolutely incredible. I am not burying the lead here. It is an absolutely phenomenal game that, in my opinion, offers more quality, interesting content than even Hollow Knight. My first playthrough was roughly 38 hours long, and that was basically 100% in the game. Again, more on that later. For context, my first playthrough of Hollow Knight to 112% was around 30 hours. I've seen estimates from some people that the game is probably about 10 hours longer in total than Hollow Knight, and that definitely tracks with my experience. I will also add that I do consider myself substantially above average at these games, and that my time estimate does not necessarily reflect that of the more average player. I spent less time on the final boss than some of my friends did on certain mid-game bosses and wave rooms. This is not to brag, I'm not a Fireborn or a Blue SR, but I'm definitely at least decent, and I think that's important to keep in mind when I discuss the game's difficulty and mechanics. My opinion does not necessarily reflect the average person on those subjects. In terms of pacing from start to finish, Silksong inarguably bests Hollow Knight. There is no stretch of Skong that is anywhere near as slow-paced and grueling as the first 5-ish hours of Hollow Knight, before the Mantis Claws. You get more varied movement abilities in the first few hours of Silksong than you do for almost the entirety of the first game, and you continue getting them up to the final 15 to 20%-ish of the game. While Silksong is far more linear, and future playthroughs will definitely be hurt by it, the intentionality of the design here lends itself to being a wonderfully paced game. It makes the first playthrough rival that of Hollow Knight. Or that's what I would say. In truth, I think I enjoyed my first playthrough of Silksong way more than I did with its predecessor. That's a pretty crazy thing to say, I think. Much of the beauty of Hollow Knight lies in the wonder, right? There's always more, always another secret, always another area. But Silksong kinda categorically can't have that, because we've already experienced that from Hollow Knight, right? We know the game will be absolutely insanely massive, with hours of easily missable optional content. We know the end of the game will feature insane areas hidden behind invisible or breakable walls. We can't have that same wonder anymore. And even without it, I still preferred my first playthrough. With the kind of exception of one set of areas, again more on that later, there was nothing in Silksong I liked less than an early Deep Nest. There was nothing worse than Fog Canyon. There was nothing as boring as running around dream nailing everything halfway through the game. Speaking of running, the movement in this game is absolutely incredible, and I would find it hard to believe that a single person out there wouldn't enjoy it more than the original. Hornet is so fun to control, and her movement abilities and attacks all synergize so well with each other, it puts the Ghost to shame. The reality is that Hornet is more fun to control a few hours into the game than in-game Ghost is. The ledge climbing feels good and so intuitive, I imagine it'll be very difficult to go back. I have some small nitpicks with a couple of her abilities that I'll discuss a little bit more in the second half, but the important thing here is that they knocked the movement and platforming out of the park. Unlike Hollow Knight, I was constantly wishing for more platforming challenges. The art is also a clear step up here. Hollow Knight is still beautiful, and I don't want to pit two bad bitches against each other for no reason, but they killed it with everything related to the art this time. The character sprite work is insane. So many NPCs and enemies have these fun little details you might not ever notice, and the towns genuinely feel like thriving little settlements. The animation quality is something else here too. There are so many funny and cute little animations to play when you hit an NPC or start using your dream nail equivalent near them that I lost count, and the bosses feel genuinely kinetic in a way that they never did in Hollow Knight. Sure, they technically moved around generally, but all the bosses in Silksong look and move like real entities. There is so much motion and energy to all their movements and attacks. It's kind of a wonder to look at and appreciate just how much Team Cherry improved on an aspect of the games that they already killed. I've seen a lot of talk about the music not being as good, and I'll be honest here. We listen and we don't judge. I don't care about the music in Hollow Knight. It is good, obviously. I like the entire soundtrack, but I never loved it. Sometimes the music in that game gets talked about like it's on the same level of Expedition 33 or Persona 5, and I personally just do not really see it. This is mostly just me trying to say that I have no real thoughts on the subject, with the exception of a single song. The theme for a certain clockwork themed area is so incredible, my jaw dropped the first time I heard it. Every single person I know that played the game commented on it as well. It is without a doubt my favorite song between both games, and it is not close. I find myself revisiting that area way more often than I needed to, just to hear it play. It is truly a work of art. I have a little, maybe stronger feelings on the sound effects and voices, actually. And again, I kind of find myself considering it similar to the original, but better. Every area has these great little ambient sounds that just tickle the ASMR part of your brain, and the character voices are so fucking funny. I don't know, they just clearly had so much fun making all the ridiculous sounds this time around. Special shout out to Pill and his brother, but it really is every single NPC in this whole game. Again, I have like almost no opinion on the story in relation to the original either. I guess I think I like it more, but I was never a mouse bag type Pokemon myself. I like watching lore videos, especially his, but it's really in one ear out the other with me. I would say I found myself more generally satisfied with the outcomes of most of the NPC quest lines, but I think the main story is more of the same as what you got with the original. I think most people that like the story and lore of Hollow Knight are gonna like a lot here too. I don't even know where to begin with the combat difficulty, to be honest. I feel like I am living in an alien simulation here. I found one single area in the entire game, including its boss, frustrating. Other than that, I thought the difficulty level was excellent and far more polished than the originals, due in large part, probably, to the experience of being more linear and curated. Other than the aforementioned area, and a lot of the late game optional stuff being a bit on the easier side, I felt like the difficulty was perfect. Maybe I got lucky, but it feels like the game was balanced towards someone exactly of my skill level. Maybe it's a cop-out to say this, especially considering the difficulty is without a doubt the number one most contentious part of this game so far, but I just don't even know where to begin with engaging with the discourse. My experience was so entirely different than what feels like half the internet's, I can't even begin to rectify it without being dismissive and frankly rude toward a lot of the people complaining. All I'll say is that I think if you consider yourself decent at games and want a challenge, you'll get it here. Something I feel a lot more mixed on is the tool system. Here's a fact. Outside of extremely late game ones, there are like 4 that are worth a damn at all. Even after upgrading their damage the maximum number of times, almost every single projectile tool can't even one-shot basic shit mobs from the start of the game. Most of the tools are just god fucking awful here, to the point where the good tools feel absolutely broken. Like, there is no middle ground here. Every single tool is either a complete waste of time and brain power to even consider using, or so good you miss out massively by not using them. There is no decent tool. Now, a lot of the tools feel good to use, and the actual mechanics of using them feel right, actually, and a clear step forward from not having them at all in a Hollow Knight. But I do think the numbers on them need a little bit of tweaking. Make the overpowered ones a bit worse, and then bring every other one at least a little closer toward them. It's not even about how late in the game you get them either. In my opinion, the three best tools in the game all come by what I would consider roughly the halfway point. The numbers are not right on them. Something can be improved here. As a note, I know a lot of people excuse this by saying one certain badge in particular makes all of your projectile tools very strong. That's a fact. I'm not arguing with that. The problem is, without that, most of them are useless. So, yes, one badge in particular does kind of rectify this issue, but I just don't really agree with that being a good point, I guess. Also, the ammo system is just truly bizarre. I don't think that there should have been a resource to fill your usage of them, and it's more of a drag than an active consideration, on top of a bunch of weird meta reasons why the system isn't well implemented, in my opinion. You have a limit on how much of that resource, shards, you can hold, and that's fine, but you'll probably reach the cap before you even find your first tool, or at least be really close. That's fine, enemies drop a bunch of shards, except only near the start of the game. As a general rule, as you progress, enemies are more likely to drop rosaries and drop more of them, and enemies drop fewer and fewer shards. This leads to this weird dichotomy where rosaries are an absolute premium while they're most useful, and shards might as well be trash in your pocket while it's least useful. And rosaries are everywhere by the time you bought the most shit you want to buy, and shards are nowhere to be seen once you upgrade your tools and get harder content and are more incentivized to actually use them. This is exacerbated by the fact that, again, a lot of the later game tools generally cost way more shards to refill and are not even necessarily as good as the earlier game ones. Big old double whammy here. On the flip side, I actually like the badge system a lot. I guess technically they're considered tools too, but I like how the different crests give you different types of layouts for them, and that there's a general distinction between combat-focused ones and exploration-focused ones. You aren't giving up long nail for the compass now, you're giving up, like, attracting rosaries for it. I've seen criticism levied that the system stymies you and prevents you from using a bunch of good ones, and that's definitely true and on purpose, but also, almost every single charm is useful in this game, and in Hollow Knight, almost every single charm except like 6 or anywhere from completely useless to actively detrimental. There was basically no build variety in that game either. Everyone used Sprint Master, Long Nail, and Buddies. This game is not like that at all. You have a bunch of incredible options. Going back to the rosaries, I think they're fine. Well, I fortunately never got to a bench or fast travel station or map that I couldn't afford. I recognize it sucks a lot to have that happen to you. I suspect they'll tweak the values a lot here. Maybe make them a bit cheaper across the board while also making more enemies drop slightly more rosaries. If not, that's okay. I think generally the economy is a massive step up here from Hollow Nest at least. You bought all the useful shit in that game in the first 1/3 of it, and then spent like 20 hours accruing thousands of geo. Basically nothing at all to spend it on, except the unbreakable charms. A system I do not like at all is the implementation of the quest system. Or I guess I should say I do like a lot of the quests, or the wishes as the game calls them. But the ones I do like basically didn't need actual acknowledgement at all. They could have just put the mini-boss encounters in the map to begin with. And oh my god, the MMO-style fetch quests are absolutely asinine. They are the one thing about this game that completely irreparably boggles me. I have no fucking clue why they thought they would be fun or interesting. Basically, maybe 1/4 of the quests in the entire game just have you killing enemies and picking up loot from them, and then go turn it in. That, like, sounds okay, except there are a few big issues here. The first, and maybe the biggest, is that you tend to only get these quests after you've either beaten the area and come back, or have already progressed like 70% of the way through it. The second is you basically have to do them. I'm not going to spoil too much here, but an immense amount of the game's content requires you to do them, including other quests from that settlement, as far as I can tell. The third is that every day in Farloom is Spike Day, and God forbid the enemy drops the item in one. It's gone. It will just be destroyed on the spot. The fourth is just that they are not fun. They aren't interesting content, they are not meaningful, they're just filler in a game that's already huge. Hollow Knight didn't need them, and even without them, Silksong is still a much longer game. I have no idea what compelled them to add these. Did anyone seriously finish Hollow Knight and say, I really wish there was a quest to collect 15 stinky bug shells? I don't think so. I don't know. The map design is still great, obviously, and Team Cherry are still the kings of individual level design in the Metroidvania ring. But I do wish the map was a little bit more interconnected. I do love the aspects of the game that benefit from the curated linearity, but there could still be a little bit more interconnectivity still. I suspect many players won't find many of the ways the levels connect, even the especially explanatory ones, but there still aren't a ton, really. And that's it for the spoiler light section. From here on, there will be almost no holds barred. I will not go out of my way to spoil something for no reason, but if it happens, it happens. The only exception is that I'll try to avoid name dropping the final boss. Again, this will likely come across as much more negative, so while all the criticism I'll levy will be serious, and I do mean it, understand that I do absolutely adore the game. It is between a 9 and a 10 out of 10 for me, and if I had to pick one, it would not be the 9. So let's start with the fact that the game is unfortunately quite buggy. I mean, I had two separate instances of a boss literally jumping out of the arena, disappearing, forcing me to reset the game. My friend had it happen to him with a third separate boss. I experienced two separate instances of an enemy in a wave becoming invulnerable, forcing me to reset. One of the abductor assholes that takes you to the slab glitched, and he thought he caught me in the cage when he didn't, started the animation to kidnap me, and I just left the room. This caused the game to load forever. A few separate times, a tool didn't reload when sitting at a bench despite having enough shards, and also not being one of the injection tools that you only have a finite amount of. There wasn't anything absolutely serious enough to dampen me too bad, but a ton of small annoying shit definitely added up over time. Another issue that's very specific, but I take a lot of issue with, is the psalm hidden after the unraveled boss fight. The entrance to the fight locks after you beat him, and if you save and quit after the fight like I did, as far as I can tell, the psalm is unobtainable forever. Fortunately, it is not required for 100%, and this was the caveat I was talking about earlier, where I kind of 100%ed it. I mean, I got the achievement. I kind of didn't, because I didn't get the psalm. But anyway, it's seriously annoying, especially when it's the last thing between you and truly fully completing the game. Biowater is a god-awful area. Let's just say that. The one I hinted at earlier, it is the single instance I felt the game was bizarrely punishing, difficult, and mean. One of the longest runbacks to the boss in the game, and arguably the most difficult to do while avoiding damage, and avoiding getting out of the maggot effect. It has one of the more annoying wave fights in the game, into a boss that had a horrendous moveset, and was one of the few enemies in the game that'll do more than 2 hearts of damage. Biowater is probably my least favorite area between the two games. It is a little much, I think. This is the area most in need of maybe a couple more benches, and in general there's really not a lot hidden in it for how big it is. It has very little to find, almost no benches, it's massive, and every room is a nightmare. It is that area in Silksong, I think. The one where you consider replaying the game until you remember you have to do it. It stands out especially bad because I do love the other areas in this game. As an aside, and this is only kind of tangentially related to it, it often gets compared to Blighttown from Dark Souls. And I definitely call it that too, I'll be honest. I disagree though that it's actually similar for a bunch of reasons. To begin with, I actually think Beatdown is a fundamentally extremely well designed area. It is narratively very cool. It connects to the rest of the map in ways that both make a ton of sense and add a lot to the lore and the world. The challenges are fair and actually quite easy once you understand them. The boss is great, very iconic for the game, and both parts of Blighttown feel similar and connected in a way that makes a ton of sense in universe, despite mechanically being polar opposites of one another. And I think this is the most important thing. Blighttown has a surplus of highly valuable resources. Power Within, the Shadow Garb set, Murakumo, Yaito, a Firekeeper's Soul, easy access to large Titanite shards, the Big Club, the Crimson set, Remedy, if you're a newer player, it's helpful. There's something here for almost every type of build, and you have a ton of incentives to go here early on repeat playthroughs. Biowater, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. There are almost no rewards there whatsoever. There are like 2 shards, maybe 4 fleas, the crying vine used for the witch's quest, and that's basically it. Not only is this area massive, annoying as shit, and poorly designed, it offers nothing in return. It feels awful and weird. I think most annoying areas in most games are at least tolerable if players are offered adequate reward for exploring them, but this just doesn't. Arguably, a big reason so many people dislike Blighttown, other than its terrible performance issues on launch, which are totally valid, is that its rewards are both difficult to find for new players or unappealing on first playthroughs, or both. Power Within is arguably the single most consistent effect in the entire game for how widely applicable and powerful it is, but new players both struggle to find it actually and struggle to utilize it without dying. The Aito and Shadow Garb set are both hard to find. The club is a pain in the ass to get to, etc., etc. I don't know. A bit of a tangent here, I acknowledge that. But Biowater is just an overall awful area that feels mean in a way that I don't think any other area across both games does. But I do adore every other area, with some small caveats for a lot of them. The big standouts for my tastes are Mount Fei. I love the platforming here. I think it's incredibly tightly designed. The Slab for its incredible set piece, one of the better ones across both games, I think. The Citadel, of course, it's, I think, inarguably the coolest area they've made for its sheer scope. Deep Docks, mechanically, is quite fun, although some of the enemies are a little annoying. And Far Fields, because it's just fun to use the umbrella parachute thing. But really, they're all wonderful. Special shout out to the entire Abyss section. It is phenomenal. And the escape set piece is probably my favorite across both games. It's just amazing. It's a great callback to the Abyss Void one from the last game, but even better. Even the Path of Pain-esque challenge feels very fair and polished compared to its inspiration, and thankfully much shorter. I have almost no complaints about any of the bosses either, sans the asshole at the end of Bilgewater, which, for my own health, I won't continue talking about. I don't know if any boss in the game reaches the pure cool factor that the Radiance does, but pound for pound, the Silksong bosses are overwhelmingly more complex, interesting, and well designed compared to their Hollow Knight counterparts. Personal favorites are the Widow, who feels a lot like this game's Genichiro, so to speak, where she's trivial once you understand Hornet's movements and limits, but is intensely difficult until you do. The Cogwork Dancers, who are an incredible evolution of the groundwork laid with the Mantis Swords. And the final boss. The final boss is without a doubt the hardest boss between both games, excluding Pantheon content. It's also incredible. The mechanics of it, the moveset, its rhythm, it's all so tight that once you master it, it literally feels like the boss is moving in slow motion. I really wonder here how much time was dedicated to perfecting this fight. I sincerely believe you could analyze its moves and behavior frame by frame and talk about how perfectly intentionally designed it was for well over an hour. It is incredibly tight design here. They set up the world event that leads to Act 3, and the way Act 3 is actually different feels really, really cool. And like with many other things in this game, it's a clear evolution of what they tried to do on Hollow Knight. In this case, it's what they tried to do with the Forgotten Crossroads as you progress further through the game. And then we come to the Pale Flower imitation quests. I don't despise these nearly as much as the fetch quest busy work, but again, I'm definitely a little confused by their inclusion. I always considered the Pale Flower to be one of the worst parts of Hollow Knight, and from what I could tell, that was a very popular sentiment. I also was, I think, more tolerant of it than most people, and I still wish these were not in the game. None of them are nearly as bad as the original one, but they're all annoying, and a pale oil being locked behind one of them is really harsh, especially for being, in my opinion, the second hardest one. I'm sure they really enjoyed that type of quest archetype to include so many in the sequel, but I really hope they got it out of their system because I never want to do another one of these shitty quests ever again. A subtle improvement over Hollow Knight that I haven't actually seen mentioned, but I bet a lot of people are feeling, is Chakra being so much easier to find than Cornifer. A lot of people take issue with the Cornifer system, and while I agree it's occasionally annoying, I think the real issue is not the system itself, but that Cornifer is often out of the way, or at least at the end of an area, effectively making the map feel kind of moot, right? They fixed this with Chakra by making her singing way louder than Cornifer's humming, for one, and her weapons tend to leave longer trails than Cornifer's pages. They also tend to place her, in my estimation, maybe a little bit closer to the 30 to 40% mark for most areas. I find Cornifer's placements very tedious, but was never too annoyed looking for Chakra. The requirements to unlock Act 3 are kind of tedious and surprisingly vague, given that it's roughly a fourth of the content of the entire game. But I think a lot of this is just how bad a lot of the quests rub me the wrong way, though. The claw line, though, is without a doubt my favorite implementation of that type of tool in any Metroidvania I have played. They cooked so hard with its mechanics, man. It feels so incredible in combat and makes platforming feel so fluid. I do sort of take issue with it costing silk, though. You spend the majority of the runtime at one silk body, so you spend the majority of the game only being able to use it once before you have to wait for it to recharge. This feels a little clunky during a lot of the platforming sections, and I don't know how to fix it. My suggestion would be having it refund the silk cost if it hits an environmental platforming object, but keep the cost if you hit the air or an enemy. This isn't really a perfect solution, but I think it's also a fairly minor problem that doesn't really need addressing. The fleas are a hell of a lot more interesting than the grubs. Whereas the grubs are largely hidden simply behind annoying breakable walls, the majority of the fleas are hidden both first behind annoying walls, but also behind platforming challenges. Getting to them feels less like a chore to be ticked off and more like a reward to be earned. 28 is also, I think it's 28, right? How many there are in the game. It's also a much more tolerable number than 50. 50 grubs, that is. And to be honest, those are most of my thoughts at the moment. I could talk a little bit more about things here or there. Could talk a lot more about some things in particular. And as I sleep on it more, I'm sure I'll come to appreciate and be critical of even more. But at the moment, I am in love. This is exactly the game I was hoping it would be, and while I feel a little bad for those who feel it wasn't made for them due to its difficulty, I would personally hardly have been able to create a more perfect experience for myself. The game feels like a love letter to those of us who love both the challenge and the world of these little creatures. I will admit that I was skeptical before release. I wasn't sure if they captured lightning in a bottle with the first game. I wasn't sure if they were the monkeys and with the typewriter that made Macbeth. I wondered if they were capable of creating an adequate follow-up to one of the greats of the genre. They were. They blew every single expectation I had out of the water and then some. I am bought in so hard now. This game has given me complete faith that they not only are capable of creating incredible experiences, but are also capable of evolving and improving and expanding their previous ideas. This game is really something special.